Cheers, everybody. Hi, this is Barbara once again for Corona Chronicles number 2. Like everybody else, I've been spending a lot of time at home, and in my house, 5 o'clock is cocktail hour. Everybody knows New Orleanians like to drink, and it goes way back when. As a matter of fact, our original French founders, Iberville and Bienville, on the very first day that they set foot in Louisiana, they settled to spend the night along a bend in the Mississippi River. And the date was March the 3rd, 1699. Well, that just happened to be Mardi Gras being celebrated back in their home country of France. So what do you think they did? They cracked open a bottle of wine to celebrate. Our original French settlers set the stage. They loved to drink. They had a laissez-faire, joie de vivre attitude about life, and they enjoyed everything pleasurable. Eating, dancing, gambling, and of course drinking fit right in there. Because they were French, they had a fondness for fine wines. But New Orleans' climate, being hot and humid, was not real conducive to growing the proper types of grapes. So most of the wines that the French settlers drank was imported over from Europe. And wines, heartier wines, such as ports and sherries that could survive the long overseas journey, were more popular. And because they liked wines, then spirits that were distilled from wines, such as brandies and cognacs, happened to be very popular as well. Now rum came along later. Rum is a spirit distilled from sugarcane, and sugarcane was grown in abundance down in the Caribbean, especially Haiti, which was another French colony and an active trading partner with Louisiana, so it was very easy to come by. Whiskey really didn't make its way into the colony until after Louisiana Purchase in 1803, and whiskey was brought in by those Americans in those 13 original colonies on the East Coast. But because of New Orleans always loving an alcoholic beverage now and again, it's not really hard to understand that a lot of cocktails lay claim to New Orleans as being its birthplace. And there were many cocktails developed in the city. As a matter of fact, some people would say that the original cocktail originated in New Orleans. The Sazerac cocktail was New Orleans first. The Sazerac cocktail was given credit to being invented by a gentleman by the name of Antoine Péchu. Antoine Péchu was a Frenchman who made his way into the city by way of Haiti. And Antoine was an apothecary. And an apothecary would be the equivalent of what today's pharmacist would be. Apothecaries also had the ability to develop and prescribe their own medications. And you might think of an apothecary shop today as what we might think of as an urgent care center. People only went to doctors if they had a major affliction, if they had a gunshot wound, or they needed surgery, or they had a broken bone. But for everyday ailments, fevers, upset tummies, you would go to the apothecary, and the apothecary would prescribe their own medications. One of the medications that Antoine developed was a tonic, and he called it bitters because it was quite bitter to the taste. And it was made with alcohol and botanicals, such as plants and flowers and roots. and his was specifically made with the gentian root. And he would prescribe it to his patients during the day, but in the evening he would serve it as an alcoholic beverage to his friends who would come over to his second-floor apartment after hours. And he would put a little bit of cognac into the bitters with sugar and a little tidge of water. And he would serve it in what the Frenchmen called a cocotier, which was a half of a boiled egg cup. And his friends would come over and they would ask for, hey, Antoine, give me that drink out of that cocotier. And in Americans, his American friends would come over, and the Americans, who couldn't speak a word of French, would eventually morph cocktail into cocktail, and eventually into cocktail. So they would say, give me one of them cocktail drinks. A few years later, the Merchants Exchange Coffee House down the street on Royal Street, and let me just say, a coffee house back in the day was a little bit more than a coffee house. They served coffee in the mornings, but they would serve alcoholic beverages in the evenings. And the Merchants Exchange Coffee House took Antoine's recipe, and they specifically used the Sazerac brand of cognac, and they added a little bit of absinthe to the cocktail as well. And they thus named it the Sazerac cocktail. So there, the Sazerac cocktail was born, and they eventually changed the name of their coffee house to the Sazerac Bar. The Sazerac cocktail is today's quintessential cocktail. As a matter of fact, in 2008, it was named New Orleans' official cocktail of the city. But many cocktails came along after that. In 1833, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Santini opened up his bar on Gravier Street named the Jewel of the South. And he later moved over to the St. Louis Exchange Hotel in the French Quarter, and he became its head bartender. And he invented a drink called the Brandy Crusta. And he took that traditional cocktail recipe of bitters, a spirit, a little bit of sugar and water, and he introduced the addition of lemon juice. And it became a very popular drink. In 1888, another gentleman by the name of Henry Ramos opened up a bar on Gravier Street called the Imperial Cabernet Saloon. And he invented a drink called the Ramos Gin Fizz, although it was originally called the New Orleans Gin Fizz. The Gin Fizz is a very complex drink to make. It has many ingredients. It has gin and lemon juice and lime juice and a little bit of soda water and what they call orange flower water and egg whites. And you take all of that, you put it in a cocktail shaker, and you shake, and you shake, and you shake, and you shake. And then you add ice, and you shake, and you shake, and you shake some more. And Henry required that his bartenders shake for a minimum of 12 minutes. So it was very time intensive, and the drink was very popular. So he had on staff 20 bartenders who did nothing more than make these Ramos Gin Fizzes. In the 1920s, the owner of Two Jack's restaurant, Philibert Guichet, went to New York, and he entered a cocktail making contest. And he entered what he called the grasshopper. And it was a mixture of cream de mint, and white creme de cocoa. And he named it the grasshopper because of its bright green color. But anyway, it won second place in the cocktail contest. So he proudly brought it back to New Orleans, and it has been their staple ever since. In the 1930s, the Monteleone Hotel and the Carousel Bar invented a drink called the Vieux Caray, and it was a homage to the Vieux Caray and all the different immigrant groupings and ethnicities that have lived in the Vieux Caray over time. It is comprised of Benedictine bitters, both Angostura and Péchu bitters, rye whiskey, cognac, and sweet vermouth. So the cognac represents the French, the sweet vermouth represents the Italians, the bitters represent Antoine Péchaud and the Haitians, the whiskey represents the Americans, and the Benedictine represents New Orleans' strict and soul Catholic beginnings. What's next? In the 1940s, the Napoleon House restaurant and bar developed their version of the Pimms Cup. Now, the Pimms Cup originated from England, but what the Napoleon House did was they changed it a little bit, and they substituted ginger ale for 7-Up, which was very popular at that time. So the Pimms Cup is Pimms No. 1 7-Up lemonade with a cucumber garnish. And it's very refreshing, and it's a perfect summertime drink, and still extremely popular at the Napoleon House. And then, of course, we can't forget about the hurricane. The hurricane, invented during World War II wartime, when it was very difficult to get imports of scotch and whiskey into the city over from Europe. Why? Because they were a little bit busy fighting a war over there. But rum, made of sugarcane, being produced in great abundance in the Caribbean, was very easy to come by. So the liquor wholesalers during that time would bargain with the bartenders, and they would say, okay, I'll give you a case of scotch and whiskey only if you promise to buy X amount of cases of rum. And they did that. So Pat O'Brien's was walking through his storage room one day and saw all these cases of rum sitting in the corner and said, what am I going to do with all this rum? So he sat down with his bartenders and they invented the Hurricane, which is a mixture of rum and passion fruit and some other fruit juices as well. So I'm going to go and have my little favorite quarantini and sit on my patio. Cheers to you and see you next time.